At the beginning of the story, we see a boy, Nick, who is studying at a college and living with his mother because his father died. At the same time, he wrote a lot of good poems. He often sells some of his poems. He has a friend in college. While he was in the bathroom, some boys came and started beating him. That's when the boys' heads arrive. A girl named Annie. Annie does all the wrong things, like stealing, selling drugs and things like that. She lives like a boy. She came here because she wanted to take money from Nick's friend. When she asked for money, Nick's friend said, "I don't have any money." That's why Annie's friends started beating him more. She then said to Nick's friend, "If you don't give me my money, then think about what I'm going to do to you." When he arrived at the canteen, Nick was also sitting here. Seeing his condition, Nick realized that Annie and her friends had beaten him a lot. He then went to Annie's house, who was sitting in the same canteen. He asks, "How much money does my friend have to give you?" When Annie doesn't answer, he puts money on the table and asks, "Is it enough?" In a low voice, and he said, "Mind your own business." Nick felt bad, so he came back and said, "You're a broken, spoiled girl. And a loser too." As he said this, he was about to leave. But Annie got so angry that she attacked Nick. And that's how they both fight. After a while, the two were sent to the principal's office. The principal tells Annie not to do it again in the future and dismisses her, as he tells Nick that such girls are not correct, so stay away from her. After that, he goes away too. In the evening, his friend came to Nick's house, who gave him money and bought him a poem. He asks, "There was a party last night. Are you going to go?" Nick says no, because tomorrow I'm going to London. There is a meeting of writers in a very large academy. He also shows her his ticket. Her friend asked, "Does your mom know about it?" Nick says no. If she finds out, she won't let me go. Now, Annie has come to see her friend, who is also doing the wrong thing like her. The two then stopped at a jewelry store. Annie breaks the window and steals all the jewelry. The next morning, when Annie starts to leave there, she starts taking the stolen jewelry with her. His friend said, "Let the jewels stay here. I will protect him." Annie says, "No, you can't protect him. Let him stay with me." So saying, she went away. At this, her friend became very angry. He calls the police and tells everything. After arriving at university, Annie began keeping these jewels in her locker. Nick's friend saw her do this. After a while, the police arrived here. When they searched Annie's locker, they found this gem. That's why they arrest Annie and grab her. But because she was a student, she was quickly released. After a week, she is brought before the court. After being released, she calls her friend and tells him that I have been arrested. He asks, "Did you say anything?" Annie doesn't say anything. Then he asks, "Who can it be? Who told the police?" Although he was himself. But Annie thinks it's Nick's friend, who gave all the information to the police, because he saw Annie near the locker. Now, because Nick was about to leave for London tonight, he says goodbye to his friend. Then, when he got home, his mother also found out that he was going to London tonight, because his flight was late. And the call from the airport was picked up by Nick's mother. When asked, Nick replies, "Mom, I was about to tell you." She said, "Don't lie, my son. When did you get the ticket? You could have told me if you had wanted to. That's weird. I feel like I'm living with a stranger. And she's leaving here." Nick felt bad too. That's why he takes the ticket in the evening and goes to the party, which his friend had told Nick about. As her friend came to the party, Annie and her friends grabbed him. They beat him a lot to get him to tell the truth. They started beating him a lot. That's why he says it's not me, it's Nick. He gave all the information to the police. It was there that he took the name Nick, because he felt that he had gone to London. But he was at the party, which gives his ticket to a girl. And now, when he started to go home, Annie and her friends caught Nick as well. Here, Nick's friend was also with him. They beat him a lot to make him stop breathing. Although his friend also stops them to do so, but they don't stop. Seeing all this, his friend was very sad, because he felt that Nick was dead. They now leave him in a deserted place and leave. Annie came to see her friend. She tells him that Nick was killed by me. Her friend tells her to get out of here. "Why did you come here?" Although Annie felt bad after hearing this, she's leaving here. The next day, Nick was sitting in the classroom with the other kids. The teacher comes into the classroom and asks a question of all the children, the answer to which no one knew except Nick. He stands up and answers. But surprised, his voice is not heard by the teacher and the children. Nick also felt strange. He asks, "What's going on here? Are you kidding me?" When he said that, he stood up. He started screaming loudly. He started waving his hand in front of everyone, but no one was able to see or hear it. He then picks up a book that was lying on the table and throws it away. But the next moment, when he looked at the table, the book was there. The teacher says Nick will talk about his poem when he's in class. He was very surprised to hear that. He says, "What's going on? I'm in the class. Why can't anyone see?" He now goes to the principal's office and picks up the phone. He starts calling his mother. Then the principal came too. The phone starts ringing. In fact, Nick felt like the phone was in his hand, but he was lying in his place. And now, when the manager picks up the phone, Nick's mom was on the phone. She asks, "Is Nick in the class?" Whereupon the principal keeps the phone there and goes to see Nick in the classroom. And now he's running away from here. But that's when he comes across a girl from where she falls. But now, when he saw her again, the girl began to move forward on her path. That is, she hadn't fallen. He ran away from here and went straight to his house, where there is a detective with his mother who was looking for his room so that he could get something useful from here. But he has no idea about Nick. Nick wasn't visible here either, when he could see and hear everything. Now, this detective went straight to Annie from here, because yesterday she had an argument with Nick. The detective tells him that someone called the police station to catch you. Was it Nick? Annie says, "I don't know. I was with my friend at the time." The detective says and leaves. Because Nick has heard everything, he asks Annie, "Did you just hit me because you feel like I gave all the information to the police?" As he says this, he pushes Annie off the terrace. But the next moment, he saw that it was just me feeling it. Nothing like that happened, because Annie was still standing next to him. After that, Nick came home from here. As he lay in the room, his mother arrived, who began reading his poems from Nick's journal. But leaving it in the middle, she left here. Later, a sparrow comes and sits on Nick's shoulder. He pulls it out of there and holds it in his hand. Nick was very happy about it, because the situation that was happening to him was the first thing he could touch. Then her eyes landed in front of him. He saw that the bird I had in my hand had fallen in front of it, and he's suffering from an injury, because she was about to die. And now, the next moment, she dies, with which she disappeared from Nick's hand. Then, seeing this, he understands everything. That is, he had discovered that I was still alive. Only my soul came out of my body. That is, I am in the midst of life and death, where my death can happen at any time, just like this bird. But if I die, then my soul will leave this world forever. The police discovered the spot where, that night, Annie and her companions had beaten Nick. Nick's friend was also with the police, but he didn't say where Nick's body was, because he felt like I was going to get stuck like that. After that, Annie and her companions would beat me too. But when Nick arrived, he stood in front of the dog and the police and tried to show them the way. That is, I'm on the other side, but it's useless. That's why, even after a long search, the police couldn't find his body. Annie came to her house. Nick followed her as well. He saw that Annie had a younger brother, with whom she loved very much. In fact, his mother was dead, and the father had remarried. Annie never had love, no one took care of her, so growing up without love and parents, she began to follow the wrong path. She told her brother that you should never be like me. She hugged her brother. She had tears in her eyes, because she herself didn't want to be like that. But circumstances forced her to be like that. She told her brother that if fate had given me a chance, then I would definitely do a good job, so that you can be proud of me. The detective went to Annie's friend's house. He says Annie called you from jail that night, when she stole the jewelry. Was she with you that night? He couldn't get in trouble, so he had to come into this business even if he didn't want to. He kidnaps Nick's friend and asks him, "Where did you keep Nick's body?" Nick's friend takes him there. Then Annie's friend moves the body somewhere else. So if someone wants to tell the police should never find the body. Then he hatches a plan to kill Annie. He calls her to meet him. Before that, he kills her. Annie grabs the gun and points at it. Meanwhile, the police are also going there. Then Annie managed to escape from here. As she ran away, Nick told her, "Don't run away, Annie. They're going to catch you." Then Annie says never and runs away from here. Nick was very surprised to hear this, because Annie could hear it. And now, as she sat down, Nick walks up to her and says, "I know, Annie. You hear me. I'm around you because I'm still alive. I can escape. All you have to do is tell the police where my body is." Now, Annie apologizes to him for what she did. Then Annie goes to the place where they had kept Nick's body. But obviously, there wasn't, because Annie's friend threw it somewhere else. But here, she finds the chewing gum wrapper, which Nick's friend used to eat. So they both figured out that Nick's friend was also involved in the disappearance of the body. So now Annie grabs her friend and asks him where Nick is. His body is not where it was kept. Now he's telling Annie the whole truth. He said, "Annie, what you think never happened. You were trying to get me to pronounce that name that night by hitting me. I took the name Nick without thinking, because I thought he'd been to London. But he didn't go. He was there. And it never happened that he gave all the information to the police. And no, I told the police. And yes, I didn't pull Nick's body out of there. Your friend did, because it is the root of all problems. He called the police and told them about you." Hearing this, Annie was shocked. She was very surprised to know the truth. But on top of that, she was also sad. So Annie goes straight to her friend. She takes him away at gunpoint and tells him, "I know the whole truth about you. And now tell me where Nick's body is." So now he has to tell her. He says Nick's body is near the dam. Get it out of there quickly, or the water will wash it away. And now, when Annie starts to leave there, her friend shoots her, injuring her, and she falls. Before the second bullet kills her, Annie shoots him and throws him to the ground. And she ran away from here and called the police. And she says, "Now you don't have to look for me. I'm leaving here. And yes, just do one thing for me. I have money in my university locker. Just give it to my younger brother. Plus, Nick is alive. His body is near the dam." When Nick was with his friend, he saw that my friend was ashamed. He thinks that if Nick isn't in this world today, it's because of me. So he takes poison. Although Nick stopped him a lot, he couldn't hear him. When his condition begins to worsen, his friend's soul comes out of his body. What Nick could see now, and he could see Nick. And then his friend's mom and dad arrived. They also found out that our son had taken poison, but his condition wasn't so bad. Nick approached the dam. Soon, he finds his body again, and then the water starts coming out of the dam. So he started to take her body, but he himself could not lift his body. He screams for help, but no one hears his voice. There was no one around. And then the detective, Nick's mom, and everyone else arrives. The police closed the roadblock. As soon as they found his body, they immediately took him to the hospital. But his condition was very bad. There, Annie also arrives at the hospital while evading the police. There was also Nick's soul with her. Before Annie could go in and meet Nick, Nick's mother sitting outside the room. She saw her. She was angry, so she slapped Annie's face hard. She told me that whatever Nick is in today's state is because of you. Nick felt bad. He shouted loudly, "Mom, what are you doing?" But Mom didn't listen. Annie said, "It's okay, Nick. She loves you. That's why she's angry." Nick's mother asks, "What are you saying?" Then she said, "Nick's there around me." Nick's mom says, "But I don't believe you. If you're right, then prove it." Nick tells Annie to tell her mother that after I disappeared, you came to my room and read a poem from my diary for the first time in your life. Then you left it in the middle and walked away, because you got very emotional after reading it. And now, through Annie, Nick tells his mom that you had a really bad time after Dad died. I have never been able to understand it, but now I can figure it all out. Nick's mom says, "Okay, tell me what you want." Then Annie says, "I want to meet Nick once, because I'm the only one who can help him. I can bring it back." So now Nick's mom allows him in. As she approached Nick, Annie's eyes were filled with tears, and she said, "Please come back." Then she rested her head on his shoulder. And now, in a few moments, Nick wakes up. That is, his soul returns to his body. Nick asks Annie, "Do you see me?" She answers, "Yes. I've always wanted to do a good job." Nick says, "And the day you did it, you brought me back. You saved my life." And now Nick was saved, but Annie died, because the poor girl had been shot and the wound was too deep, and she wasn't cared for. But she didn't care about her own life. She saved Nick's life, and she was right. Now, Nick went to see Annie's brother who was flying a plane. Annie's brother says, "My sister used to bring me here, who is no longer here in this world. She was very nice." The child was sad. Then Nick tells her to cheer herself up. "Let's send Annie a message." We're like, "Hey Annie, are you okay?" Annie's brother says yes. They write this down and send the plane into the air. Both of them could see the plane flying, and the story ends.